I'm going to show you how to create a two-way live sync between tables in two separate, completely separate documents. No need for crosstalk. This is going to get wild. Quick warning, this is more of an advanced Coda technique. So if you're just starting out with Coda, go watch some more of my 101 or beginner or intermediate videos, as this is going to go over some more advanced topics. But hoping you guys learn a lot. Let's get going. All right, let's get into this two-way sync. So we've got two documents here, document 1 and document 2. It doesn't matter which one starts or is the origin, they're both going to sync with each other. So first, let's just make our table. For quickness sake, I'm just going to have our AI write it for us. So let's get that table created. I'm just going to create a table with people in it, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different columns. And I'll show you how this is going to sync to the other table. So let's keep that. And let's call this people. This is the table that we're going to sync to our document 2. So let's go ahead and just copy this. I'm going to copy it without any rows in it first, just to kind of show you how we're going to send them over initially, and then how we're going to send them back. So how we're going to do this is via webhooks. Webhooks are something that allows you to essentially send data to one service to another. Oftentimes they're between two different services, but in this case, our webhooks are going to come from one Coda doc to another Coda doc. So what we're going to need to do first is get a pack. So I'm going to do insert packs, and you're going to look for Coda webhook. So Coda webhook, built by yours truly. So let's add this to the doc. Once you're there, you've got two buttons and a formula. You really only need to use trigger webhook v2, and that's going to be the button that we're looking for. So now that that's in there, we're going to create a button. I always call it hook, just to be able to see them. Sometimes I'm doing this with multiple, and I'll have like 10 different hook buttons, so that just helps me quickly identify which ones I'm looking for. I'm going to call this send data, hook send data. This is going to be a column type button. The button column is going to access a pack, Coda webhook, trigger webhook v2. Now what it asks for is a URL, an auth token, and then this add more is going to be really, really important. We're going to need to do that. So this is going to be where we're sending the information to, the URL that we want to send information to. So we need to define that. It's not the URL of your document, rather it's the URL of a webhook invoked automation. So how I'm going to do that now is in document 2, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open a automation. I'm going to create one, and it's going to be a webhook invoked. You'll notice that what this gives us is a URL. I'm going to name this. I always name mine catch because this is catching the incoming webhook. This will be important later because there'll be multiple automations we are going to build, and it's important to just name your automations and really just your tables and everything in Coda well so you can find it later. Catch people data. So let's copy that URL. That's copied. We're going to now put it in here. Now it asks for an auth token. And this is the auth token. I'm going to create it, and we're going to pass it right in there. Now, this is the most important part. It's add more, additional options. You're going to see this little screen come up, and it's add, and this is where we define what data we're passing over. You could send over anything you want. They come in key value pairs. So I could send over a key of dog, and I could send the value dachshund. That's not how you spell it, but that's okay. All right, so you can send over any arbitrary information you want, but our goal in this is to send over the information from the people table. So I'm going to name a key, which is usually, it can be anything you want, but it's going to match our column headers. That's going to help you identify this later. Normally, I like to do it without any spaces in all lowercase. Later on, when you catch this information, it is case sensitive, so it's important to use simple words that'll be less likely to be misspelled. So I'm going to say name, email, age, birth, and then we'll do color, COLOR, and we'll do state. Now for each of these values, we're going to put the current row's value. So I'm going to press the equal sign on my keyboard, and I'm going to say name. And then same thing here, we're going to say equal email, equal a. All right, so now I've got all the columns mapped here. We're going to go test this out, see if it works. So now we need to go into here. We need to turn this on. If you press this button and it gives you an error, which it probably will right now, it's going to be because likely you did not turn your automation on. So see, returned an error. That's because it's not on right now. So make sure it's on. But then we need to define what's going to happen when we send that webhook over. So very similar, we're going to need to define what information from our webhook we need to map into this table. So let's say when we receive a webhook, so when that button is pressed in document 1, we want this automation to do something. We want it to add a row. But we don't actually, because we wanted to add or modify. The key to keep this in sync is that every time you press this button, we don't want a new John Smith, right? If you press this 5 times, we don't want 5 John Smiths. We want 1 John Smith. So there's going to be something else we're going to send along besides this. We need a unique identifier. In many cases, you could use an email, but it's going to be much safer because emails could be the same if there are 2 John Smiths in this table. It's going to be much safer to use a unique identifier. I'm going to call this identifier, and we're going to use the Coda row ID formula. So that's going to give a unique number. So this will always be unique. Even if you erase John Smith, there will never be another number 1 in this document ever. So we can trust that that's going to be unique. So let's go ahead and add this to here. I'm going to call this identifier, and we're going to say equal to identifier. All right. So then we come in document 2, we actually want to add or modify a row, right? So we're going to say, let's add or modify to people. Filter is telling us what's that unique ID that I can trust is unique and I should modify if I find it. So we're going to say, well, if you find one where, so now we need to make that column here too, but this one needs to be editable. So I'm going to insert a column to the after, and we're going to call this identifier. Perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to say enter to where identifier is equal to, and now this part is going to be a little complex. I'll explain it right after I do it, but it's step 1 result.parse JSON for identifier. All right. Step 1 result is the result of the first step in your automation. So notice that it has a big 1 here, right? 1, 2. So this is step 1, and the result of it is what was returned. So I'm saying, okay, Coda, I want you to add or modify a row. First off, if you find a row in my table where the identifier column is the same thing as what was received in our webhook, but specifically, we're using parse JSON to say the identifier piece. So that's going to go and it's going to look into this button. It's going to look at this identifier, and it's going to say, okay, if I find a row where this identifier matches what was sent over in the webhook identifier, then I'm just going to modify that existing row with the information that came. If not, it's going to add a new row. And now we set the values that are going to come. So we're going to say name, email, age, birthday, favorite color, state, identifier. This is where it's important. We need to match case sensitive in these boxes, what we put inside of these boxes. So let's do that real fast. For each one, you're going to press the equal sign to open up a formula. And you'll say step 1 result.parse JSON for name. And we'll repeat that for each piece. All right, so now we should be done. We have an automation called catch people data. It is on, and we've said when it is caught, add or modify a row. We've given it the row to match that unique ID, and we've defined the different pieces that it should add. So let's go ahead and press this button and see if that works. So we're going to send that over. And there it is, John Smith. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and let's send all of these over real fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There we go. Okay, so now in document 2, it looks just like document 1, right? We got our people here. But let's say that we modify something. So let's go here. Right now, this is our kind of source. So we only have a one-way sync right now. This is one-way syncing here. So let's take Emily Davis and change her favorite color to rainbow. Okay, rainbow color. You'll notice that in document 2 right now, Emily Davis's favorite color is purple. But let's go ahead and press that button, Emily Davis, rainbow, click. And there you go. Emily Davis is now rainbow. It did not make a new Emily Davis whatsoever. So this is, we're about halfway there, right? We have a sync from document 1 to document 2. You could see too that we can kind of create a new row here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new row for myself, the Coda guy. Scott at simplidocs.com. My favorite number is 21. All right, let's just send over some of that info. So boom, you'll see here's the Coda guy, and I'm built down there. All right, so now let's think about how we're going to automate that first off. So we don't want to have to click buttons every time this happens. So what we're going to do to automate these syncs instead is we are going to set another automation. I always call these ones send. Again, naming really matters. Send people data. I'm going to turn it on, and this is going to be a row changed automation. It's going to say if a row changes in any editable column in the people table, then go ahead and I'm going to do step one result. That's accessing the row that changed, saying, hey, whatever row that was. And now I'm going to do dot to bring out the hook. So all I'm saying is when a row changes in people, press its button for me. Notice that's on. So let's go ahead and let's make a couple changes here, and we should just see these. Let's change these all to 100. So row change automations do take a bit, 10 to 15 seconds, but we should see over here soon that some of these are going to change to 100. So that's how we automate that piece. Now we need to send over this second piece, right? People. How do we ensure that when we update here, it goes over there as well? First thing we're going to do, and look at, there's our hundreds fill in. So we're pretty much done. Document 1 is now syncing to document 2, but we want a two-way sync. So we're going to do something very similar here. We are going to go to Insert, Packs. We're going to search for Coda webhook. Install that thing. We are going to set a button, trigger webhook v2. And now, very similar setup. So we're going to go ahead and set this up to match this. All right, so notice that here I'm doing catch people data again. So eventually I have a send people data and catch people data. I'm going to have the exact same automations in both of them. I'm going to have a catch here, and then I'm going to have a send here. So all I'm doing right now is just basically mimicking what I did from in that first 10 minutes. I'm now mimicking it from document 2 to document 1. But stick with me, because there is something really important that if you don't get, you're going to mess this whole thing up. So stick with me real fast. Here's a quick trick for you. I'm going to turn this into a formula, and I'm going to be able to do this mapping a little bit faster because these tables all have the same names on them. I'm actually going to go into document 1. I'm going to press equal sign here, turn this into a formula. Then I'm going to go ahead and just copy this entire piece, copy it to my clipboard, turn that back into a visual editor, go to here, let's press that. Now I'm just going to insert that, comma, and then boom. That's just a quick piece for you to get a little bit faster. I can actually do the same thing, I believe, for catching the data as well. Let's try that. I'm going to add a modifier row. I'm going to turn that into a formula. Let's go ahead and look at this catch people data. Look at it as a formula. Copy and paste. Notice that I have a red dot here that's saying you can't do that. I don't know if it's an invalid option because I can't set the value of a column defined by a formula. This identifier is defined by a formula, so we can't set that. So I'm just going to delete that option. Catch. All right, so we should be good. We're almost there. But stick with me, because remember, there is one tricky thing at the very end that we need to make sure we get before we go. All right, let's try this. Trick web 2, hook over. So I'm going to turn Emily Davis into a 55-year-old who is from Ohio. Let's see if this works. One external action performed. Emily Davis is a 55-year-old from Ohio. Great, we're working. So these two tables are now in sync. I've just got to make sure that this same send people data is working. Yep. Okay, so we're good. But there is one issue, and if all that you want is a two-way sync like this, you're fine. But the one issue that we need to solve for is we can create a new row in here, and it will map from document 1 to document 2 because of that identifier piece. But what happens if we want to create a new row in here? If we want to create a new row, so let me just show you the issue. Let's say we create a new row called Snoopy, and is Snoopy at snoop.com, and he is 31, right? Let's go ahead and update that. We should send that over. There we go. We'll see Snoopy's here 3 times, right? So anytime you create a new one from the second document, so the second document is the one where the identifier is editable. If you create one from here, it will continue to create duplicates in this row. Not good. So what we want to do is to be able to create another source column. So we're going to call that, I like to call this source. Source 2, right? And we're going to use something else. I'm going to say this row.objectLink. Gives me a complete unique identifier. Also has some other UX benefits. You'll figure that out on your own later. Use the object link. So what I'm going to do now is actually add this to all my buttons. So let's do source 2. Great. And then we want to also catch this. So when I catch, I want to add, no, not in this one. When I catch in here, I want to add that. So we need to have that as a piece. Source 2. So this is like if it came from that source. We're going to say equals step1 result.parse JSON for source. All right. And then we need to also send over that data via this button. Source equal this row dot source 2. All right. Now we're going to change something here. We're going to change this filter identifier. So this is going to be really, really interesting what we're going to do. Let's copy this for later, but we're going to say, actually, no, let's give this a name. So I've defined this as a name. Actually let's do this piece. This row, it should just be step1 result.parse JSON for identifier. I'm going to call that with name, so that gives it a name I can reference later. I'm going to call that the row ID, okay? And now I'm going to say if row ID is blank. Why would row ID be blank? The only reason row ID would be blank is if the row of the person originated inside document 2, right? Because if it originated inside document 2, it doesn't have one of these identifiers. So if that's the case, then what I want to filter off of is actually my source. So you're essentially saying whatever's in this filter needs to match the unique identifying source where the row was actually created. So let's go ahead here and let's say, okay, well, if that's the case, if it's blank, then find out where the source in this table is equal to step1 result, almost there, dot parse JSON for source. If not, do it to where identifier is equal to row ID. Boom. All right, now we can go here and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say essentially, hey, Coda, you're going to add or modify a row, but I need to tell you which one specifically to add or modify, or which source column to use, right? Which source column do I use? And I'm going to say step1 result.parse JSON for, let's parse JSON for source. If the source is blank, we know that it originated in document 1. So I'm going to say with name, let's give this thing I just did a name, and let's call that source. And we're going to say if source dot is blank, then do it to where identifier is equal to step1 result dot parse JSON for identifier. If not, do it to where source is equal to step1 result, state of residence, no, dot parse JSON for, I got this, source. Boom. All right. Now what this should do with our automations and with our pieces should allow us to, when we create a new row here, I'm going to just turn off the send because I don't want that to automatically trigger. I'm just going to trigger it myself. What I want that to do now is essentially, let's go here. Let's create a new row called Darth Vader, Darthy at darth.com. All right, we're going to send that over. And you should now see Darthy at darth.com show up. There he is. Now we should be able to update his information as 43, send it over, and it should not create a new row, but it should update his currently. So that's how we create a two-way sync. If you want to grab this template, if you don't want to build this by yourself, you can do so in the comments below. Let me know if you guys got any questions. Peace out.